So the most important work you can do is provide care for somebody. Really letting people know that we do that and we do important work, and making sure that when you look at first responders and people that have like respect in our country, you think of nurses, you think of firefighters, you think of EMTs, you think of police, right? Caregiving is the fastest growing occupation in a lot of states throughout our country. Caregivers are on the front line doing all of these things too, oftentimes in more unpredictable settings in the home.
You're listening to Home Care Hindsight, the podcast where we talk with home care leaders about the big mistakes they've made and the even bigger lessons they've learned along the way. I'm David Knack, head of sales here at Zingage, and I've built a career on the idea that we learn a whole lot more from our mistakes than from our successes, which is great because I've made a lot of mistakes. I've gotten to know some of the leaders in this industry who've built amazing businesses and are super well respected. So I thought it'd be fun, instead of asking them about the great things they've accomplished, to have them tell the story of one of the biggest mistakes that they've made and how that mistake changed their thinking and the way they run their business. All right, welcome back to another episode of Home Care Hindsight, brought to you by Zingage, the leading caregiver engagement platform. I'm joined today by John Bennett, CEO of Sunny Days In-Home Care and a few other agencies. John, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
For people who are not familiar with you, how would you introduce yourself?
So I'm John Bennett, like you said, the CEO of actually DLEM Holdings. It's a holding company that owns multiple home care agencies. Sunny Days In-Home Care in Pennsylvania was our initial company, our flagship company. We have a couple other agencies we own in Pennsylvania, and then Wisconsin, Michigan, and just opened another location in Ohio. So excited about that. I've been married for almost 15 years, have 3 awesome kids, and a dog at home. Yeah, I really love helping people out. I used to be a high school teacher. Taught stats and geometry. I still coach football part-time, still love working with youth. And I was blessed with the opportunity to grow up with 4 grandparents and 3 great-grandparents through most of my teenage years. My family has kids young. So really got to have an appreciation for the senior population and really see the joy that they can bring and the wisdom and knowledge too. That they can bring to us. And oftentimes, in our culture, it's so focused on youth that I think seniors, sometimes they're forgotten. I mean, we're very different than like Japan, or somewhere like that.
Yeah.
So it was really great. And having the blessing to grow up with grandparents, to just learn so many things from them and get exposed to kind of care towards the end of life for them as well, really gave me appreciation for this industry years before I actually was in it. So yeah. That's kind of it was a long answer, David, but yeah, that's who I am. So I'm excited to be here.
Well, I think everybody who listens to this show is going to be familiar with that like challenge of we serve the most like overlooked, let's shove them to the side population because nobody wants to think about death and dying and that our lives are going to come to an end. And that is the reality that stares everybody in home care in the face every single day. It's such a challenge in culturally because we want to push that stuff to the side and not think about it. And the result is that real people in kind of the twilight of their lives, what should be a very special time, it can result in being a very like lonely and forgotten kind of time. So I appreciate that call out.
Yeah, it's definitely true. I mean, we really try to like sterilize death, if you will. And I think there's something to be said with, the whole concept of somebody, dying the way they want to, if possible, and where they want to. And that's important. And I hopefully the trend is to kind of get back to that in our country instead of get further from that.
Yeah, we're way off track already, but I listened to, there's a really interesting podcast episode, this show called Pablo Torre Finds Out. He's like ostensibly a sports writer, but he's really just like a storyteller who like, I guess kind of ties everything back to sports. One of the things that he's detailed is the number of like American death rituals that have started to circle around sports, because sports is kind of this remaining communal piece of what it is that we do together. And so there was some guy when the Colorado Avalanche were making their way to the Stanley Cup final who put his buddy's ashes like on the ice as the Zamboni was coming through. Okay. And there was this big thing that made headlines, but people who study this sort of thing are saying, there's no real kind of communal places to do like what's called like a death ritual. I think churches increasingly are not becoming the center of that for a whole lot of people. There's more and more like non-religious people than there ever have
Sure.
been. And interestingly, sports and this one racetrack in Florida are kind of filling in some of the gaps there where people are putting ashes on golf courses and racetracks and baseball fields and ice rinks. So that's
Yeah.
interesting.
That's definitely fascinating. There's that ritualistic thing kind of brings you closure too. So
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah. Okay. Well, when we first met, one of the things that I found was really interesting about you and the way that you think about your business is like metrics and efficiency is like core to the way that you approach things. We were having a conversation and it was around the time we were Ava then, but what about Zingage is of interest to you? And, usually people have good answers, right? They're like turnover's hard or they're like, all these administrative tasks are causing us issues and we help with all those kinds of things. But you were the first person who said to me, well, the 2030 rule is coming into place, or the 80/20 rule is coming into place at like 2030. And if we grow our caregiver census by X and our administrative footprint doesn't grow past Y, then we're going to be able to hit those milestones and be ready for that when it comes. And that was a different kind of conversation that I had before. And so talk to me a little bit about like how you think about metrics and why that's so important to your business and kind of some of the ways that shows up in the way that you do your work.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I just spoke at a senior networking event a couple hours ago, and the topic was missional metrics. And so, kind of goes right in line with your question that you're asking now. So, I really believe there's three types of companies out there. There's companies, and this is especially true in the home care sector. People start home care agencies because they have a passion for helping individuals, particularly elderly people or people with disabilities, which is great, but they're all heart and they don't pay attention to finances or metrics at all. And those companies a lot of times won't last. They'll be really great for a while, but because they're not actually tracking things, they don't stick around long term. Then you have companies which we're seeing with PE getting involved. Not all PE is bad, but sometimes PE comes in and all they want to do is kind of gut everything and only focus on the numbers and take away really the mission of the company. And those companies eventually referral sources and clients and caregivers figure out they don't really care about us. All they care about is the numbers. Those companies don't last either, right? So then you have the third company where it's heart, right? You're really passionate about people, you really care for people, but you're also tracking all these different metrics. You're making sure you're financially savvy and you're in it long term. And like I had said this morning, you have to have both of those components because if you truly believe that you're making a difference in people's lives, right, and you are one of the best or the best out there in your area doing it, you have to stay in business in order to continue to make a difference and help those people, right? So it's important to have those metrics to track what you're doing. And how do you know if you say like I'm a great company, I really care about people and do a great job taking care of them? How do you know? What are you comparing that or measuring that against if you're not tracking any metrics? So it's really important.
Yeah. I was at a conference recently, and Lisa Eckley, who's one of the co founders of LTM Group, which does a lot of home health and hospice and some personal care in Ohio and Texas and whatnot. She said, no margin, no mission.
Yeah.
And I wrote that down because I thought that was a really good way to say, like, we have to focus on the fundamentals of the business because if we don't, we're going to be that first type of business that's all heart and no execution and the lasting impact of that business is not going to be very significant.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a real life example. So I wish I was out of the office more, but I try to go out from time to time and do some ride alongs with some of our field managers and go meet clients and caregivers. And I sat in this home, and as soon as we sat down, I introduced myself to the client, and she says right away, "I have a bone to pick with you." And I was like, "Okay."
Mhm.
And she said, you need to pay this caregiver more. And she kind of went on a rant about wanting to pay the caregiver more. Now, keep in mind, we're 95% Medicaid VA. This location I was particularly at the time in Pennsylvania. And she kind of got done with her rant. And I said, you know what? I 100% agree with you. And she was, kind of taken back that I wasn't arguing or debating with her and everything. And I said, unfortunately, we only get reimbursed so much from the state. Pennsylvania is really low. I think we're the lowest of every state that borders us, particularly here. And I said to her, you can write to your state representatives. I mean, ask them to increase the rate, but I can't give her a pay increase. She's kind of at the max where we have any kind of margin at all. If I increase her, then we're going to start to lose money taking care of you. And as much as I would like to do that for her, I believe in, fairness and I would need to increase other people's pay as well. And eventually we're not going to
Yep.
make any money and we're going to go out of business. And then there's hundreds of people that aren't going to get the quality care that we provide. So, and she's like, I really frustrated by this, but I appreciate your transparency.
Yeah.
And it was a good conversation. So that exactly, you have to have margin for mission, and it's true.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to transition to a part of the show where I ask, what kind of person are you? And in order to ask that question of you, I want to ask you, what's something that you could start a podcast about?
Yeah, so I've wanted to start a podcast for a while now. I know it's kind of the cool thing to do. People talk about doing it. Not everybody does it like you have, David. But I've it's because it is intimidating, right? I think hey, I can do one or two, but doing it consistently is tough on a regular basis. So I've wanted to start a podcast for a couple years now called "Tell Us Your Story," where basically I interview elderly people throughout the country who have really lived through a really cool period in time or have a unique story that other seniors would kind of resonate with and connect with. So like for example, like the pastor from my parents' church growing up, he's a pastor now, but he used to be a hippie. He was at Woodstock. There's a lady that I used to teach with. She was in administration. She marched with MLK. One of our clients that we took care of in North Carolina, she was the first female prison warden in the state, one of the first ones in the entire country, who did a lot of stuff with prison reform. Another guy we took care of flew UE helicopters in Vietnam. So just talking to these individuals about what it looked. One guy worked for the Boston Globe. I actually met him on an airplane. It was fascinating to hear how news had changed from, when he first started back in the day. In some locations in Boston, there were still, I forget what they're called, but like the younger guys out there, like basically selling newspapers,
Sure.
and how
Yeah.
it transitioned to, now it's online and the newspaper and print's kind of dead at this point. Just fascinating, but sharing that story with other people, and really kind of targeting the senior population. I don't think there's a lot of podcasts that target the senior population, and a lot of them grew up listening to radio, right? So that would be my podcast that I would start. Tell us your story and just interviewing people. I really have a passion for seniors and hearing their stories. There's a lot of stories that are forgotten, and I know we had kind of
Yeah.
talked about a little bit about before we came on board that culturally our culture doesn't really give the respect and appreciation to seniors, and just getting them a voice and a platform to share these stories. And there's a lot of value and insight that can be learned from them. So that would be my podcast that I would start, and I need to at some point.
Yeah. Well, this won't come out for a couple of weeks, so you've got time, John. If you want to get your first episode out there before this drops,
Yeah.
you theoretically could.
Yeah, no, that's true. And to be honest with you, I love having those conversations. So
Yeah.
that would just be the enjoyment of that would be one of the main motivators for doing it.
Yeah. No, I have to say, like, I think my company agrees that this podcast has been a good idea for like the business or whatever, but like it has been fun to do. So
Yeah,
if you have
yeah,
an idea that you can do repeatedly, kind of sounds like this is something you could do repeatedly, I'd do it. It sounds fun.
yeah,
Okay. Well, John, you've built pretty impressive business in Pennsylvania and some other places. Recently got naming rights to a stadium there, which I think is interesting. So you've
yeah.
accomplished a lot, but I don't bring people on to talk about the things that they've done well. Instead, I bring people on the show to talk about the big mistake that they've made and the way that changes how they think about their business. So, John, what's your big mistake?
Yeah, so I'm a former statistics teacher, high school statistics teacher, and I got involved. It's a family-owned business. I got involved about 10 years ago. Business had been around for about 4 years at that time, and it was all culture, and there were really wasn't anything related to metrics at all in the business, and there wasn't really uniformity systems in place or anything like that. So I really went hardcore metrics data. That's make every decision based off of that. And for a while, it was really, really helpful because it kind of took the pendulum that was so far from culture and brought it more centered. But as I continued to push with the data component and metrics and all of that stuff, it took it too far that direction, right? I swung the pendulum too far, and we started to have some issues, just not only with like morale, with growth.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, let's analyze all of this stuff, and we need to figure out, we just need more. We need more metrics so we can make better decisions. And we ended up we do celebrations every time we break another 1,000 hours of care per week, like get to a certain level, we do celebrations. And we ended
Yeah.
up doing the celebration. We did an escape room. It was like escape room and axe throwing, just
Yeah.
kind of off the cuff to reward people for some of the good things that have been happening in our company. And if you look at metrics, we didn't really deserve to hit it, right? But it was a good thing that we just wanted to do. So we did it. And afterwards, about a month or so afterwards, we started to grow again.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting that there was nothing in any of our metrics we track or anything else that said we should have had this, right?
Yeah.
And there was nothing we were doing differently. But the feedback that we got and the light bulb that kind of clicked in my head, and I kind of got smacked in the head with it and was like, oh, duh, that's obvious now that I look at it. Was culture is just important as metrics.
Yeah.
And it took a real life example for my stubbornness or my lack of understanding, I guess, for me to see like, hey, just doing something for people to feel connected and part of a team, really that team mentality and team attitude,
Yeah.
and to show that we appreciate people and care and like to have fun too, caused us to start to grow again.
Yeah.
And it was purely a cultural event that caused that to happen. So I would say my biggest mistake, and it's been good as we've acquired companies to make sure that we really try to stay in that center area where culture and numbers are both valued at the same level, and we figure out how to really mesh those together and not just focus on one or the other because it kind of goes back to the three types of companies I said at the beginning. You're not going to be successful unless you really have a good combination of both of them. So that was a
Yeah.
big learning lesson for me, and it took too long for me to learn that, but once I learned it, then I've been able to make sure that I have checks and balances in place to keep us from swaying too far one direction or the other.
Yeah, I think that's really an interesting story. I mean, we talked about at the top of the show that like you are by nature a very like efficiency and metrics driven kind of person. And I think like the business case for metrics and tracking that stuff and measuring and like is built into the thing, right? If
Yep,
we this is a Stephen Tweed line that we can never escape. Like what gets measured gets managed, what gets rewarded gets repeated. It's easy to make a case that the stuff that we measure, it's a good idea to do, and there's positive ROI associated with it. I think
sure.
culture can feel like such like a smushy ambiguous kind of like how do you quantify the ROI of culture? And so obviously this particular story, it's like, look at, could it have happened if we didn't do the escape room? I guess maybe, but like in your
Yeah,
mind, there's very clear causation between we did this
100%.
culture marker for us and it spurred a kind of growth that we otherwise wouldn't have seen. What are some of the other ways that you like quantify the business impact of great culture?
So I'm a big believer in momentum.
Mm,
Playing sports growing up
yeah,
and coaching some now, and oftentimes culture is what drives momentum, right? And it can be good or bad momentum. I've seen different places where things have really started to take off at different locations at different times, and you kind of get this momentum, and it's contagious, right? And
mm,
people really start to buy into that, and then things just start rolling in a positive way. I've also seen it happen in a negative way, and so for us, it's really we design our entire kind of field model with our management team. It's all based off of Stephen. Before I met Stephen Tweed and was part of the mastermind group, we kind of had already modeled our business that way.
yeah,
And what we really value and is important to us, we're bonusing people out and they're getting incentive pay and everything else off, right? And then once I met him, I was like, oh, and he said that, and I was like, okay, well, that's exactly what we do, but how can we do it even better? So that part's really good. But as far as like actually like seeing like how do we quantify the culture, retention is a big thing for us. You can track every number you want out there, but if your retention is starting to be worse, there's obviously there's some kind of issue, and a lot of times it's a cultural issue, and it might be isolated to a specific location with a
sure.
specific person in management. But retention is a big thing, and then satisfaction from our clients and caregivers as well, where we're going out, we're in the homes on a regular basis, and really getting feedback on people kind of right there front lines and
Yeah,
and seeing what their thoughts are and everything. And not everybody's honest all the time. Maybe they're intimidated to be honest, but a lot of times people are very, especially our clients, they're very direct and opinionated, and they let us know what they feel about certain things. And just that feedback, it's much more subjective than objective, but you can take that subjectiveness and kind of put it in almost like a rubric, if you will.
sure.
And it really helps us figure out like, is our culture what we want our culture to be right now? Or are there things and changes that we need to make? We've had things where the morale is down. We're
Yeah,
performing great. The company's growing. We're hitting all the numbers, all our KPIs, everything's great. But we know it's not sustainable because the morale's not there, right?
yeah,
And maybe it's because we've allowed people to do certain things where they're making more money, but we know they're going to get burnt out.
yep,
And they basically turn into like a zombie kind of employee where they're getting what they need to get done, but it's kind of sucking the life out of them. And we don't want that. And so I would say you have to be really in tune with your team. And from an owner executive standpoint, you have to have people that are bringing that information. That feedback has to go down, but it also has to come back up, right?
mm,
And you really have to be able to get that feedback from these individuals to you to make decisions because culture is huge. If you have a bad culture, people aren't going to want to be part of your team and they're going to leave.
Yeah. You mentioned like the big thing of, we did this escape room and axe throwing thing that really was a pivotal moment for us. What are some of the other things you've done from like either a proactive or kind of a responsive kind of perspective to address issues with culture that get brought up and alleviate those kinds of things?
Yeah. So with our management team, we have it's been long standing. We have a monthly in-person staff meeting with the field staff. This is non-caregivers, right? But all of our field management and office management, we get together once a month. That's educational. Sometimes we bring something in, like it's a new thing that we're learning about. Sometimes
Yep.
it's things that we have to address and talk about. There's a lot of transparency there, but we eat together. We always have lunch together, and that kind of breaking bread as a team is really important. The other thing that we do on a regular basis with our office staff every Monday, we have a standing meeting. That way, we keep it from getting too long. People
Yep.
sitting down and talking to, but we stand up, and there's two things. Everybody shares, and you share about your weekend, and then you talk about anything going on this week that people need to be aware of. But the weekend part's really important because I don't want somebody just to say, "Oh, hey, that's Jenny, the payroll specialist," right? I
Yep.
want them to know, "Hey, that's Jenny. She had to deal with an issue this weekend. Her sister was supposed to get married, but the guy left, and so she's trying to help her sister, and she's upset. So mentally, she might be a little off this week. Or hey, this person just came back from their 20th class reunion, and they're super excited. Or hey, it was just a boring weekend, and I did laundry and grocery shopping just like you." And but it puts that personal touch because you're going to
Yeah.
go through stressful things, right? Home care, like there's a lot of industries out there where you can make more money and have less stress than home care. Like
Yeah.
I think everybody that's going to listen to this podcast knows that. And so we know we're going to go through stress, and we know we're going to be put through trials and fires. And knowing that this person is somebody outside of, whatever their position in the company is huge.
Yep.
So we really do that. And then the other thing that one of our directors brought in, Heather, recently, about a year ago. So in our monthly in-person meetings, do all the metrics and everything else. And she said, I just feel like we're not focused enough on the clients and who they are. She said, I had been in a location before where every month we shared all the new clients that came on board. We had their names all listed, and we shared a story about one or two of the clients that came on board, each
Mm.
manager. So we started doing that each month, and it's really cool. People say, hey, we just had a guy last month who in 2014, when Russia invaded the Crimean Peninsula in Ukraine, his family fled. Eventually, he ended up in Pittsburgh, and he's needed care. So, and our managers went, and he's made, some Ukrainian dishes food wise. He's still able to do that. He just can't get around and ambulate very well.
Yeah.
But hearing about him, that was a really cool story. There's other stories, this person is a retired police officer, and they're telling us a story about that person. Or this lady was a nurse for 40 years,
Yeah.
and now she needs care. And just hearing the stories, sometimes they're funny too. One of them a couple months ago, her fifth husband just passed away. And she said, he wasn't her favorite, but he was her second favorite. You know, so she's outlived, five different husbands. And so but that's kind of some cool stuff, right? You get to hear these stories, and the stories are really important. And then any client that's passed away, we have a little bit of a moment of silence there
Yeah.
for the clients that have passed away. And that has been really impactful. We've had outside guests come in, and they'll come up to me afterwards, someone that's an insurance agent or whoever it may be, and they're like, hey, the client story part, that's really good. We don't see that anywhere else.
Mm.
So that's been a really great thing that we've added, just to really make sure that, why do we do what we do? It's ultimately to make sure that these people can stay in their homes and get care, right?
Yeah.
And when we hear the stories about them, that's something that it's just a really cool thing.
Yeah. One of the things that I think about a lot is there's the Gallup Q12 survey, which is like kind of the industry standard for an employee engagement, employee morale kind of survey, and serves as a really useful proxy for, do we have a healthy culture or not?
Yes.
And it's yes, it's agree, disagree questions on like a 0 to 10 scale or 1 to 10 scale. And one of the questions that I think home care generally has a really difficult time with is agree or disagree. The mission of my company makes me feel that my job is important. And I think,
Mm.
from office staff down to caregivers, the work is important and everybody knows the work is important. But I think
So
where so many agencies miss the mark is they could do that exact same work for you or for somebody else. And so what's the additional value that your company is imbuing into the work? Wow, it's a theology term that makes it more meaningful.
yeah. No, and that's a great question. And I just to add, I guess, another event and tie it into what you just said. So we do picnics in the summer at
Yep.
different pavilions, different parks, right, throughout, and we have clients and caregivers come. And then we do Kennywood's like a local amusement park in Pittsburgh, and we have a big picnic for our management team, and we get tickets really discounted cheap for clients and caregivers.
Yep.
And last year we had, I think between all our Pennsylvania locations, I think we had like 450 people come to this event. Was
Yeah.
crazy. We have the company name on the front, but on the back it says we do important work, right? And that's really what we want to focus on with our caregivers is taking care of somebody is the most important job in the world. Like
Yeah.
there's nothing out there that's going to have more impact. You think about like new parents, oftentimes it's the mother, right? But new parents in general with this newborn baby, I mean, they're caring for that baby. You're a caregiver, right? For this baby out of the way. The only way you came in this world if somebody was a caregiver for you that you survived, right?
Yeah.
Somebody had to provide that care. And then on the other end, leaving this world, you want people caring for you as well, too. So the most important work you can do is provide care for somebody, right? And
Yeah.
we thankfully, we're able to do that for a lot of people. And I know a lot of people listening to this are able to do that as well. And that is a hugely important thing to do. So really letting people know that we do that and we do important work and making sure that, one of the things I've talked about before and some different things I've been on is when you look at first responders and people that have like respect in our country, you think of nurses, you think of firefighters, you think of EMTs, you think of police, right? Caregiving is the fastest growing occupation in a lot of states throughout our country. Caregivers are on the front line doing all of these things too, oftentimes in more unpredictable settings in the home than some of these other professions, right? And caregiving doesn't have that same kind of level of respect and appreciation that these other
Yeah.
jobs do. And that's something that we've kind of made it, at least in our area, is to really educate people, help our caregivers believe that, but educate the local community too that caregivers and what they're doing is just as impactful and just as important, if maybe not more important than some of these other professions as well. So just really instilling that and preaching that message, if you will, to our team, and then living it out too. We can talk the talk, but we have to walk the walk on how we treat people. So that's an important thing.
Yeah. I'll put you on the spot here. You guys have been using Zingage for what, probably 6, 8 months now. How does your decision to partner with us kind of relate back to all the stuff we've talked about so far around culture, efficiency, we do important work?
Yeah. So one of the biggest reasons, and everybody knows how hard it is to get a quality caregiver, and then to lose them is not fun, right? And some of you maybe are dealing with situations like me where it's Medicaid and the rates aren't as much as you would like to pay individuals. So you really have to figure out how can we make sure these people stay on our team and that are great people and want to make a difference in the world, right? So engagement and not feeling like you're engaged and part of a team is one of the biggest reasons, right? With activated insights, right? Formerly Home Care Pulses survey that came out every year. That's one of the main reasons that caregivers leave. So engagement was really big for us. We're such a decentralized model. I mean, we have a caregiver right now that's on a shift that's 4 hours out of one location from our caregiver on the very southern end of our territory, right? So how do you connect with both of those people at the same time? And using technology is one of the only ways that we felt like we could do it regularly, right? Our field managers are in there from time to time. But so Zengage has been really cool to be able to do that and connect with those individuals. We try to like different things, but giving them the opportunity to essentially gamify their job and be rewarded for doing things that are important, that do make a difference in the clients' lives. I feel like that really allows us to show people, like, going back to the Stephen Tweed quote, like, we want to train people to value and do things that are important to us as a company. And what's
Yep.
important for us as a company is making sure that people are getting quality care. So if we're rewarding our caregivers for clocking in and out on time, clocking in and out correctly, not missing shifts for so many consecutive days, I mean, that lets our caregiving team know that's what we value as an agency, is that consistency and making sure people get the care that they need. And in turn, they're rewarded for it. And being able to do that with Zengage is nice. Tracking it manually would be a pain, right? So, it's been exciting to be able to partner with you guys and do that. And honestly, like, that's one of the things from a cultural standpoint that we look at, like, what do we do for our caregivers? We give them an opportunity to essentially earn points and be connected with the company through the platform. So it's
Yeah.
a good thing.
It's great. Well, I want to move to a part of the show where we talk about something that's overrated in the industry. And so you've got a story of something that points to the fact that M&A sometimes is a little bit overrated. So talk about that.
Yeah. So I think most people think, hey, I can get money I can get a loan, or maybe I have money that I've saved in my account, not taking distributions, and I want to go expand and buy another company. And it's just going to be, going and buying it and getting the people kind of in line with our processes, and we'll be good to go. And I can double, double the income I'm making, but also double the number or triple whatever it is, the number of lives that I'm impacting positively, and employment I'm getting people, and all these things, right? And I would say that, yeah, from like a 30,000 foot view, that's great. When you get into the nitty gritty of acquisitions, it's a little more complicated than that. And so personally, we've done 6 acquisitions. Actually, we did one way back in the day and had it for a few years, um, since I started here, and a lot of lessons learned. But going and acquiring companies versus starting your own, I definitely think is overrated. People view it as, kind of a pie in the sky. This is going to be an easy thing. And you're kind of misled with that too during the diligence period, right? So you are, you're getting all this information, you're asking all these questions, finding out all about the company, and everything's great. And it's kind of like when you're out buying a house and you're looking at the house and everything seems great, right? And then once you buy the house, then you're like, oh man, the maintenance on this thing. I didn't realize, I was going to have to bag 100 bags of leaves every fall. I didn't realize that it was going to be such an issue maintaining the driveway. And it's the same whenever you're acquiring a company. Everybody has their best on, during the acquisition period. And then once you acquire it, then you get to see, like, under the hood and the nitty gritty. And the integration has been way trickier and way more difficult than the actual diligence part leading up to the acquisition. Now, we have a great blueprint that we follow and everything else, but you're still dealing with so many variables that can change with the employees, with clients and caregivers. We're really undersold on the owner's involvement. And this company was, all the business was coming through the owners that were selling and staying on for a couple months, and kind of all the operations were run by them. And we were really led to believe by them and the employees that were staying on board that the employees were really driving all that. The owners were just kind of handling billing and payroll. And, we asked all the questions and everything, and really were duped. After seeing this and learning what I've learned, that same thing, isn't going to happen. And unfortunately, that was difficult. That acquisition, we've had a lot of success with a lot of our acquisitions, but that one, unfortunately, after 3 years, we just closed it down last month. It was a smaller acquisition, and it didn't go well. And a lot of times you learn more from your failures and your successes. And I would say that's definitely true with that one. So
Yeah.
that was a tricky one. Another company that we acquired, a pretty large acquisition, was rated by FBI, IRS, HHS, county sheriff, and attorney general about 3 weeks, little under 3 weeks after we bought the company. I got called. I went over there. There was 26 armed agents from different entities. I got interrogated, and they wanted to know, if we had some kind of behind the scenes deal that we made and everything. And we said, if we knew this was going to happen, we wouldn't have bought the company and
Yeah.
paid fair market value for it and everything else. And so we just wrapped up that investigation. We had to do a stock purchase in order to maintain our license. And we just wrapped that up investigation a few months ago. We did nothing wrong, but it prevented us from going out and acquiring other companies because we couldn't get any money loaned to us. And that company has performed well. We haven't really been able to grow it much because we've been kind of like lightly blacklisted with referrals. Still getting some, but not the amount that we're used to there. Now that we've got that done, things are starting to uptick, which is great. That was a really tough situation. It slowed down a lot of our plans, and what was going on was really undiscoverable, from everybody I've talked to and explained, and people that have done hundreds of acquisitions, in our space. I've talked to them about what happened, and I don't know how we would have discovered that, unfortunately. So sometimes it's things that you learn and you should ask. Like, we could have done a better job of asking questions and diving into the one acquisition with the owners. But this other one, sometimes you have surprises thrown at you and there's skeletons in the closet, and then you've already bought the company. There's nothing you can do about it. And so it's not now. That company is performing really well, but the amount of work that went into it and the
Yeah.
headaches and everything else, it's a lot. And then you think about when you're buying this company, if you're paying a 3, 4, 5, 6x multiple on it, without interest, it's going to take you, if you don't grow the company at all, that many years just to get your money back, right? So you have to factor that into it as well. How long do you want to be in this? What's your long-term play? If you're confident you can grow it and get your money back sooner, that's great. And maybe you don't care about that,
Yeah.
and it doesn't matter. But I would say that M&A is definitely, because I don't know about, about what you've heard, David, but there's so many. We get calls constantly. I'm sure a lot of people do listening to us. Hey, we're interested in buying your company. Hey, we're interested in buying your company. So many people want to get into the home care space because it's senior citizens, right? And that's the hot industry to be in right now because of baby boomers. And you have that tidal wave just starting to hit the shore. And so they really make it sound great. And it really seems like this glorious thing. And it can be, our one acquisition up in Michigan, as smooth as it possibly could go. It's been really great up there.
Yeah.
It can be that, but the law of large numbers, eventually you're going to have an issue with it, and it's not as glorious as it seems. So I would
Yeah.
say that's definitely overrated. And if you're thinking about doing it, don't let what I said deter you from doing it. But also, it should kind of maybe bring you down to a more of a reality check that it's not as easy as oftentimes it's presented.
Yeah. And I could see people listening to this who are like, I'm never going to do M&A, but there are parts of the business that I've been actively involved in, and I need to be able to get those off my plate if I'm going to be able to focus on XYZ strategic priorities. Or we're thinking about like organically opening a new location from the ground up. And so, what are some of the things that you've learned through doing these acquisitions and integrating these agencies that might apply to somebody who maybe on a smaller scale is looking to do a better job of delegation or is looking to increase their geographic footprint through some kind of organic means?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So, and just to kind of frame it, so we are consistently kind of regularly growing our geographic footprint, right, and
Yep.
getting into new areas. And then we just opened a brand new location across the border in Ohio.
Yep.
We should be starting services here fairly soon. So we've kind of have every experience with that. There's either two ways that your business is going to stay consistent and successful. It's either people or processes, right? Ideally, you have both. But if you're a smaller agency, or maybe you're even a larger agency, and you're a bit of a micromanager, control freak, like I am sometimes,
Yep.
I know that take a process, right? I know that I can drive that process. Our collections, let's just take collections, for instance, with Medicaid, it can be tricky. I know that really well. I kind of designed the whole program. I know when I'm involved with it that it's going to get done correctly the way I want it to get done. Our collection rate's going to be really high, right? And I also know that, and knew, and this was a learning experience for me a few years ago. If I'm so deep in the weeds with making sure we get all of our collections done, I'm not going to be able to navigate and guide us and do all these other things. So I had to essentially delegate that, right? And not essentially, I had to delegate that and give it up. What I didn't have in place at the time with that particular area was a really good, consistent process. I had the process for, hey, as long as everything's going well, here's the steps that you follow,
Yep.
right? Great. That catches maybe 95, 97% of what we're doing.
Yep.
But what about the other 5%, whatever it is that doesn't work?
Yep.
Well, I knew in my head how to solve those problems just because of doing it for so many years and experience. But the person that took over collections isn't able to read my mind, right?
Yep.
So, how in the world did I get that to hurt? Well, I had to have a consistent process. And it was a little bit, painful, but we had to sit down and literally work through these problems and type up, here's the exact process. And then almost extract the information from my head, or other people from my team who have had to delegate certain things, extract the information from their head, wherever they're a subject matter expert on, and get that information in a process so that you can delegate that to somebody to do. Or like in Ohio, we have a really good onboarding process that it's been successful in different states. We had to make sure we take that 90% of it's the same in Ohio, tweak
Yep.
the other 10% to be state specific, but that's the process that we want to make sure we follow in Ohio. And if you don't have the people there, you have to have the processes. Ideally, you have both, right? So you have
Yep.
really good people following really good processes, but the process thing's important. And I would say that if you're looking at opening a new location, expanding into a different area, if you don't have the majority of what you're doing, your major processes typed out and kind of defined and tested, you need to do that before you do that expansion. Otherwise, the
Mm.
expansion, you'll go do and I've seen this. People have went and focused on an expansion in our industry, and their original location has started to crumble and decline because it wasn't run by processes, it was run by them. So now
Yeah.
that their focus is elsewhere, this starts to go down. And there's that saying, and it's from Aesop's Fables, but it says, "He who chases two rabbits catches neither."
Yep.
And if you are trying to do both, you're not going to do well with either of them. If you're doing one, then you're not going to catch this other one. But if you have somebody else there with the processes that's able to follow them, they can get that rabbit, you can get the rabbit over here, and you have both rabbits caught, right?
Yeah.
So I just think that that's something that making sure that you're really solidified in that standpoint is key to being able to expand and grow, whether it's through M&A or organically or open a new location. You have to have really solid, consistent processes.
Yeah. Well, that's super good advice. I want to transition now. We talked about a lot of mistakes, but I want to hear about I like to end every episode on a high note. And so, what's something that's happened lately in your business that you're really proud of?
Yeah, so we have a pretty unique model with field managers. Most agencies are going to have somebody who does scheduling, somebody else who's dealing with the clients, right? The intakes, the assessments, the regular visits, and then someone else who's kind of recruiting, onboarding, training caregivers, right? Kind of three different people.
Yep.
We've taken those positions. I call it the home care triangle in the field. We've taken that triangle and combined it all into one position, and that's what we would call a field manager. And it's been really great for us. Our field managers are able to go out and they're the ones that are doing the initial client evaluation in a care plan together, getting to really know what their needs, wants, preferences are. They're going out doing the onboarding, recruiting of caregivers, finding out what their needs, wants, and preferences are. And then they're managing that ongoing relationship and doing the schedule. So they're really good at figuring out what their best fit is for them. Are they going to work well together? When there's call offs, who to put in the home, who they think will be a good fit. And it's really, really great. We really keep that personal touch, regardless of how big we get. Once we get so many hours, we get another field manager, right? So that model's worked great. We've replicated it in different locations in different states. But recently we had maybe a mutiny might be the best word, a threatened
Yeah,
mutiny.
sure.
Our location in Michigan, Wisconsin has been doing really well. We have a really great team up there, really great group of caregivers. In our other states, our caregivers, or excuse me, our clients are averaging around 39 to 40 hours of care per week. You go up there, it's 9 to 10 hours per week, right?
Hmm.
A lot different.
Yep.
And what we found was, so you go to, let's just pick a location in Pennsylvania. If I'm taking care of, let's say 20 clients, that's 800 hours a week. Well, if I want to do 800 hours a week there, I'm taking care of 80 clients.
Yeah.
Well, 80 clients is a much different caseload than 20 clients.
Sure.
So the way that we had our pay structure set up and our expectations and everything else wasn't working with the field managers we had in place. And we had a lot of people just basically say like, I'm getting burnt out. I can't handle this. It's not worth it. Like I need to, I need to move on. And initially I'm like, no, this is our model. I don't want to, we want to
Yeah.
be consistent. Then, after talking to my team, and this is having really good people in place who can get that feedback and bring it up, right?
Yeah.
Getting that feedback and information to me and my leadership team, we said, no, we have a really good team. We have a really good thing going. We have really great momentum, right? The culture is great. Everything's great there. We need to adjust our model because our model is not making the quality of employment for our field managers something that's sustainable. They're going to leave us, right?
Yep.
Financially, okay, we're good as a business. Financially, we're good for employees. This is kind of a little matrix I always use. Financially has to be good for the employee, good for the business, but the quality has to be good for the business and good for the employee. We checked off 3 of them, but the quality for the employee was not there because it was too much. It was too burdensome. So we had to figure out, make some tweaks and change some of our hourly expectations and census expectations with the field managers. And really, the heart of our model is the same, but the way we approach it is a little bit different. And everybody that had kind of maybe not threatened to resign, but some of them had, and other ones were just like, I just don't think I can do this. They're all very satisfied now, and things are going really well there, right? We had some efficiencies. We had to kind of add another position to help with visits and in-person things, but we had saved some money with some other areas where we were a little bit more efficient. So it's kind of a wash financially, and it's been really good for us. So that was a big win, not just for me, but for my leadership team to
Sure.
take that problem and how do we make sure we keep that positive momentum, that good culture and everything else happening, but not lose kind of our core value with what we believe in our field manager model. So
Mm.
that was a big win. And it's went well. And, we were kind of stagnant there. This goes back to culture and how it impacts things. We were a little bit stagnant in our growth there for a few months. And as soon as we put this in place, last week we had our best week ever there, right? And we put this into
Yeah.
place about a month ago. So it's been really cool to see that. So that's a big win for us, figuring out how can we meet people's needs and keep our employees happy while also making sure our clients are still getting served. And as a company, it fits into who we are. And that's, you check off all those boxes and it's a good thing. So that was very satisfying.
Yeah. Well, that's really exciting. Before we get out of here, what do you want to plug?
Yeah, so this may be maybe contrary to what many people are saying right now, but we are very passionate about Medicaid. I know reimbursement rates are low in a lot of places. I know that this administration there's different threats to cut funding. The last administrations there was the threat for the 80/20 rule. So Medicaid's always going to have, regardless of political affiliation, there's always going to be threats and low reimbursement rates with Medicaid. But these individuals still need care. And that's something that's really, really important, is that we're able to meet the care needs. So if you're currently doing Medicaid, you're thinking about doing Medicaid, you don't know how you can make it work margin wise, I just challenge you to figure out how to make your company efficient enough that you can serve that population, because they need care as well, and it can really make a difference in people's lives. And you'll see there's a lot of people getting out of it. And maybe when everybody's selling, maybe that's the time to jump in and buy and figure out, how to make it work for your company, and get these people the care that they need. So that's my plug for you, David.
Yeah. Well, John, thank you so much for joining the show. Really enjoyed our conversation this week.
Yeah, it was great talking with you, and looking forward to hearing more great people on the podcast.
Awesome. On behalf of the team here at Zingage, thanks for listening to the show. We'll be back next week with another episode, so be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, on Spotify or Apple or YouTube. Leave us a rating while you're there. It helps other people find the show. If you have comments on the show, drop me a line, david@zingage.com. Would love to hear from you, chat with you there.